Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 167, IO 532a to c. Socrates has just concluded that someone with techne in a particular subject will be able not only to recognize who speaks well about that subject, but who speaks badly about that subject. Socrates had used as his examples the arithmetic techne, the art of number, and the iatrike techne, the art of the physician. We noted one major difference between these two technai. The physician should be judged not by what he says, but by what he does, while the arithmetician has no choice but to talk about number. And then I was wondering at the end of the last episode whether rhapsody would be a techne like the arithmetike techne or like the iatrike techne. It seems to me that rhapsody differs from both because of its subject matter, while the physician has an external physical subject matter upon which it can act. Arithmetic has an abstract subject matter which can be manipulated in the mind but can only be talked about when communicating with other people. Rhapsody is to do with talking. That is the subject matter of rhapsody. Talking itself is the subject matter, so it's different even from arithmetic. Of course, it's not about any speech at all. It's about the speech of a poet, which needs to be expressed in the best way possible for the audience to enjoy it. I mentioned this point here simply because I was comparing the two technai, which Socrates does mention. I don't think he's going in this direction here. Let's see what he is doing. He's definitely going to talk about rhapsody now. Uk un ho autos gignetai denos periam photeron? Nai. So the same person is terrific about both? Yes. So the same person is terrific about being able to judge who speaks well and who speaks badly in any particular techne. Uk un su fes kai Homeron kai tus alus poetas, en hois kai Hesiodos, kai Archilochos estin, perigeton auton legen, al uch homoios, ala ton men iuge, tuste cheron, kai alethe lego. So you claim that both Homer and the other poets, among whom are Hesiod and Archilochos, about the same things they speak, but not similarly, but one speaks well and the others speak worse. And I say true things. In other words, Io is saying that his claim is correct, but when did he make such a claim? He said that Homer was different from the others, and then it was Socrates who asked whether he meant that Homer was better than the others, and Io agreed, but it hadn't been something Io had claimed. Since Io agrees with it now, we may say that it was one of his basic assumptions, but he also isn't very good at dialectic. In other words, he doesn't remember what has happened in the conversation. So just like in Meno, we have an example of someone with an excellent memory. He remembers thousands of lines of Homer, but he doesn't apply that memory to conversations. Ukun, eiperton jo legonta gignoskes, kaitus cheron legontas gignoskois an hoti cheron legusin. Eoikenge. So, if indeed you recognize the one speaking well, you would recognize the one speaking worse, that they are speaking worse. So it seems. I'll just mention here, since it has happened, that earlier Socrates was talking about the one who speaks well, as opposed to the ones who speak badly. But now, when talking about the poets, one is speaking well and the others speak worse, which means not so well. It doesn't mean that they speak badly. We might speculate that Socrates knows that Io wouldn't agree that poets speak badly. They're simply not so good as Homer, in his view. Ukun. This is the third time in the last three sentences that Socrates uses ukun, so, therefore. Ukun o beltiste, homoios ton ion alegontes peri Homerute denon enai kai periton alon poeton, hamarte sometha. So, O best of men, if we say that Io is terrific similarly about Homer and the other poets, we won't be mistaken. Socrates will have to explain why Io is terrific about the other poets as well, because Io himself has said that he's terrific about Homer, not about the others. So this is what Socrates says in support of his claim. Epedege autos homologe ton auton esestai kritēn hikanon panton hosoi an periton auton legosi, tus de poietas chedon hapantas ta auta poien. Since he himself, that is Io, agrees that the same man will be a sufficient judge of all those who say about the same things. And he also claims that roughly all the composers compose the same things. When did Io ever say that nearly all composers compose about the same things? Socrates earlier was trying to compare all poets when they speak about the same things, which is not the same as saying that nearly all poets always, he doesn't say always, but that's the implication, talk about the same things. Socrates does this because he is trying to set Io up as the one who knows in poetry, as a rhapsode, which poet is speaking well and which poets are speaking less well. And he has effectively established that the comparison can be made only if they say the same things or they talk about the same subjects. There you can compare what? You can compare their style, which he doesn't talk about. He doesn't say that the rhapsode is actually considering the style. The most important point here is that Socrates finally mentions the word kritēs, judge, and he's applying that to Io, while Io is a rhapsode who is usually judged by others in competitions. It may not have occurred to Io before that in his preference for Homer over other poets, he is effectively being a judge. It seems to me that Socrates has latched onto the point that Io is a judge simply in order to help Io distinguish between subject matter and style. If all poets are talking about the same things, that isn't where they are distinct. Where are they distinct? In the way they talk about the same things. In other words, the way they compose their poems. Io's reaction is quite interesting. Tiun poteto aition o Socrates hotiego, hotan mentis peri allu tu poietu dialegetai, ute prosecho ton nun, adunatoticae hotiun sum balestai logu axion, al atechnos nestadzo, epidandetis, peri Homerum neste, iuthus te gregora cae prosechaton nun cae iuporo hoti lego. What on earth then is the reason, Socrates, that I, whenever anyone converses about another poet, I neither pay attention nor am I able to contribute anything worth saying, but I simply doze off. But when anyone mentions anything about Homer, I immediately wake up and I pay attention, and I have a lot of things to say. He uses the verb iuporo, which means that he is full of answers. This is the opposite of aporia, having a lack of answers. So when it comes to Homer, Io is fully prepared and he can talk about the poet. So a rhapsode is not simply someone who quotes Homer. He can also talk about Homer. He can explain Homer. And actually, when Io describes himself in this way, he sounds like the person who can speak well on a subject, and he would be judged by a judge. Io doesn't do what a judge does, which is to recognize someone speaking well, but he is the one speaking well, according to him anyway. This would help to explain why Io himself is at a loss for what Socrates says, that he, Io, is the judge both of Homer, who speaks well, and the other poets who speak less well. Io himself thinks of himself as someone who speaks well about the poet who speaks well, Homer, while other rhapsodes, according to him, are people who speak less well, presumably, and about other poets who speak less well than Homer. Among other things, it looks as though Socrates has to sort out for Io who it is who is speaking well. Is it Homer, or Io, or both?